Okay, here's a question on end times. What is your view of the eternal state of the unsaved? The three main positions seem to be, number one, eternal conscious torment, the fire of hell. Two, universalism, all will be saved. And number three, conditionalism / annihilationism, that the soul perishes or ceases to exist. So, the short answer to the question is I believe very strongly in view number one, the eternal conscious torment of the soul, although I would very much like to believe either option 2 or 3. The reason that I am just compelled to believe number 1 is because of the plain reading of the text. You don't get option 2 or option 3 unless you're looking for it. You're trying to find something other than the plain reading of the text. And let me just read a few of the texts that make this point. I mean, it just is explicit over and over and over again. Matthew 25:41, Jesus says, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels." Matthew 3:12. His winnowing fork is in his hand. He will clear his threshing floor and gather his wheat into the barn, but the chaff he will burn with unquenchable fire. And Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, "And many of those who slept in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt." Mark chapter 9, the place where, these people are being thrown into hell, quote, "where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched." Luke chapter 16. Remember Abraham and Lazarus here. "Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame." 2 Thessalonians 1:9. "The smoke of the torment rises up forever and ever." Speaking of, this place of punishment and eternal destruction. Revelation 14, "The lake of burning sulfur, where the wicked are tormented day and night forever and ever." I mean, there are more. There are more passages. It's just a smattering of them. Every text that speaks of this speaks of eternality. There's a length involved in it. It doesn't end. And of some sort of extreme pain. Now, people who are going to want to try to say something different than this are going to want to try to focus on the word eternal. And they'll say, well, there are places where we use the word eternal that doesn't actually mean eternal. And so they're going to try to make some argument that, or they're going to say, like, listen, man, I mean, devil's not a physical being. I mean, can a flame hurt a devil? I mean, so clearly we're talking about some sort of allegory here. We're talking about something non-literal. And my response to that would be to say, listen, I agree that we're not likely talking here about real flames. But that doesn't undo the eternal conscious torment that's being referenced. I mean, we're not talking here about annihilating people, getting rid of them. If that was the case, then it would say it. It would say we're just getting rid of them. And we're certainly not talking here about universalism, where they're all going to become saved one day. I mean, even in metaphors, the metaphor still is very clear as to what it's communicating. If I was to tell you, anyway, I'm not going to go there, but the idea here is the crystal clear reading of the text, and it's been the historic understanding of the text as well, all through church history. Matter of fact, there have been some periods of church history where to deny it, you would have been labeled a heretic. So I think there's the plain reading the text as an example. I think also you have the question of the eternality of the soul and what did the work of Christ accomplish on the cross. All those things are kind of, there's atonement-related issues, there's theological issues. So I think it's very, very dangerous in my mind to remove the eternality of hell. If for some reason in the end, it comes out I'm wrong on that, or the Christians have been wrong on that, I mean, that would be a joyous discovery. But flip it around the other direction. I mean, to believe that, oh, it's no big deal, they're just going to be annihilated in the end, or it's no big deal, it takes away the motive for the gospel and sharing your faith, because you're like, they're not going to really suffer like that. And I think that's important as well to consider that. A final thought here, the justice of God, the white hot justice of God, requires, that's the theological bedrock in eternal suffering, is that there is something that is to be said. There's a backdrop against which this reality is understood, and that is the justice of God. That you do weaken, at least weaken, some of these concepts of the holiness of God, the justice of God. Even substitutionary atonement takes a hit when the doctrine of hell, of eternal conscious torment, is removed. So is it horrific? Absolutely. It makes me shudder just thinking about it, honestly. I actually hate the doctrine because it's so terrible. But I can't get away from it. Like, if I believe this book is God's word, if I believe that, that's what this book teaches. And it ought to cause us to move out into the world with zeal and earnestness, because after all, how can they hear without a preacher, right? And how can they believe unless someone tells them? And how beautiful are the feet of those who bring the gospel. So let's do that. Let's take this doctrine and allow it to motivate us into action to share the gospel with those who don't know him. It's hard to talk about in today's age. It's very hard to talk about. But if it's real, shouldn't we be talking about it? Shouldn't we be telling people that, listen, there's consequences to not bowing the knee to Jesus Christ? You're going to do it one day, either willingly or unwillingly. You'll do it. But there's consequences, man. You do not want to be on the wrong side. So let the reality of this doctrine move us into sharing our faith, sharing the good news, the hope that Jesus Christ has died to save us from that horrible, horrible place. Let's be about his work in that way.